just a couple bad weather fans representing New York, talking all things sports. Man, what could go wrong? We got Alex, who's a fan of the Knicks, and Mike of the Nets. The yin-yang of the tri-state, place your bets on the Yankees, Giants, Mets, or Jets. Yeah, you should listen if it's sparking your interest. If you made a vow to your team, don't break it. Bad weather fans is the relation.
That's right, this Bad Weather Fans, episode number 247. Mike Biseglia, Alex Vanessowitz, and we are presented by DraftKings. New York Knicks playing good basketball. They're 20-10 now on the season. After starting 5-6, they've played really good ball. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Nets, they're officially in tank mode. We're recording this as they're playing the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks playing with two players, Giannis and Dame. They're still up 11 on the Nets, but we'll keep you posted as this is going on. When it's done, I'm sure you'll know the final score. Nets in tank mode, Knicks in title mode, and that's where we are right now, Alex. But we're going to have a special guest on here on the episode today. But before we get there, I'm going to ask how you're doing, but I know the answer because the Knicks are playing good ball.
Yeah, a guy you're familiar with, Mikal Bridges, 41 points yesterday, Christmas, or 2 days ago, whenever you're listening to this. So I'm pretty happy about that, riding high. But I'm really excited to talk to Barstool's own Matthew Piper Jenks, who's thanks for coming on. Make sure everybody you like and subscribe. Your first time listening. But Matt, how are you doing?
Good. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Not normally a guest. I'm normally Frank Fleming's right-hand man. I gotta ask Mike because I don't meet a lot of real like hardcore Net fans. What's the plan? Like if you're a Nets fan right now, you're saying you're in tank mode, but do you think that franchise, the way it's set up right now, isn't any sort of a place to actually rebuild? Do you think you can get free agents like with the Knicks actually being good again? Just out of genuine curiosity. I feel like if I was a Nets fan, I'd be pretty depressed.
I appreciate that introduction. I like the question. Yeah, I'm depressed about it. Think about this, Jenks. You had a couple of years ago, you had three of the best players in the history of the NBA on your team, and you couldn't win, and it was an utter disaster.
Well, it was
really depressing.
That. 2 out of the 3 wouldn't play.
They don't even play. But when
Like
they
ever.
They
did play.
Give some credit. Katie
Durant tried. Yeah, he just kept getting hurt.
When they did play, they didn't lose. Like when they were healthy and together, it was incredible to watch. I mean, I'll think about that playoff versus the Celtics. They beat them in 5. Then they take the Bucks, who won the championship that year. Game 2, they beat them by 39 points. They're dunking all over them. They're doing this without James Harden. The Nets were that good. So to answer your question originally, yeah, it's really depressing. It's really depressing to be that close to seeing a team win a championship. And then you have to see the godforsaken Knicks now have it, in the mix as one of the teams that can do it. For me personally, who despises the team and the franchise and does not like them, that's even more frustrating. We can get into that in a little bit, but yeah, it's tough. Now to answer your question, I do think there's some hope because I wouldn't go the free agent route, but they've done a nice job acquiring assets where I think draft wise they can rebuild through the draft. Not saying it's a guarantee, definitely not. I'm sure it'll fuck up, but at least they could try.
Feels like, but then you trade the assets like Bridges once you have them.
He wasn't very good.
Why do you hate the Knicks? Like we've sucked for so long. Is it just because our fans are so obnoxious?
No, I love these questions, by the way. I love these lines of questions.
Let me. Do you like? Is there another team besides the Knicks you root for in sports?
No,
the Mets, right? You don't
like
root for the Mets?
Baseball. Nobody.
It's a great. No one's actually ever directly asked me that, and I've had to explain it to people. With all the other sports, as I grew up, I went to college and then I moved to Italy. I had kind of a weird route. But the NBA, going back to my childhood, I actually lived in Belgium for 2 years across the street from a farm in the mid-90s.
Okay.
The only content I had were the VHS tapes my granddad would send me of NBA on NBC triple headers then NBA entertainment. And I became totally enthralled with NBA history to this.
Yeah.
Like inside stuff you get like on the VHS.
Ahmad Rashad, all that stuff. And as I got into my teens and stuff, and I realized I like girls and all that shit, I realized the Knicks were the only thing I had time to put all my heart into. So that's really my one team. And now working with Frank Fleming, every other sport, it's about mitigating his stress.
Right.
So I root for whatever is going to cause the least fallout.
That's fair. That's fair. I would guess I would put it this way. It would be like, imagine if you are a Cowboys fan or an Eagles fan. I said, hey, if you're an Eagles fan and you lived in the same city as the Cowboy fan, you would despise them. And I think it's that simple as Nets and Knicks are in the same division. Uh, I I don't like them, right? Like they've been here.
Yeah, I
I've
guess that's
seen
fair.
them,
And he
and
grew
I
up
just
with the
I
Ewing
think
Knicks busting the
and
Nets
I
ass in
think
Jersey.
because think when you kind of simplify it, well, my division rival is 8 miles away. My friends in the schools are all Nick fans. You know, it grows on you and it annoys you. I think there's some Nick fans that are. I think a lot of Nick fans are great people. I think a lot of great friends.
Not all, right?
But
Yeah.
when you go there, you know, sometimes it can be frustrating and annoying. Alex knows this. Like, I'm a Nets fan. I've still yet to meet, and maybe this will change after this interview. I've still yet to meet a Nick fan that knows more basketball than me. So it's
Oh,
always
yeah, sure.
frustrating when Nick fans are like, there's nothing like the Nick fan. They know the game so well. And I'm like, do they? So, you know, that's just kind of the quick
Well,
answer.
I think not to be too philosophical, if you generalize any group of people, I think that's fair. But I also think Knicks and Net fans, I guess they're different groups that go to the Garden and go to Barclays, but I think in the Northeast, a lot of us that play on the hard tops understand hoops a little better because you have to earn buckets.
Right.
And we get into that later in terms of why I've had a little bit of a heartbreaking year where ironically the Knicks are doing so well, but I'm so pissed at NBA basketball at the
Right.
same time. It's like I'm confused. Last question, sorry, then I'll let you guys interview me. But
No, honestly, I could do this for 45
Yeah,
minutes.
Nets fans.
You want to do a quick introduction? Let's start the show over. Let's pretend like we never did start.
Alex.
This is bad.
The other one, Mike, is do you wish that the Nets stayed in New Jersey? Do you like the fact that they're in Brooklyn?
I wish they stayed in New Jersey, but it's because it's for me. Like my son is now 4 and he's like getting into the Nets. I live in Jersey. Getting to Barclays is a massive pain in the ass.
Oh, it's
And
the
going
worst.
to Jersey,
Stadium itself is
a
not
lot.
nice. For
Even if you
brand
live
new
in New York, it's a pain in the
But
ass.
I do know
Yeah.
for the health of the franchise, um, as much shit as Knick fans and people in the NBA want to give the Nets and their organization, I mean, what they've done now in Brooklyn in the terms of what they're making in money far surpasses anything they did in New Jersey. As much as it's like, oh, they're shitty, if no real fans go to the games, I promise you, as somebody that went to net games and saw Yinka Dare pass the ball to Rex Walters and then got it back to Khalid Reeves, I promise you, this is a bigger buzz. As much as I just don't think Knick fans noticed it then, because they had a team with Ewing, Starks, Oakley, Mason, etc.
I know Mike knows ball because he brought up Yinka Dare, whom Frank constantly references as the worst player of all time.
You know, he went 4 years without an assist.
Yeah, which is impossible. Like, I don't understand how that's possible to never have an assist in your NBA career.
All right,
Rest in peace.
I'm done asking all these questions.
You're
sorry.
good.
All right, Jenks. Well, how did you let's hear about your story. How did you wind up at Barstool? I know it's a crazy kind of a story you were telling us a little bit in our pre-production meeting. You know, how did you end up there?
I think it's a fun story to tell because I ended up.
Sorry, let me pause you. For those who don't know, you produce Frank Fleming's show, the Frank Walks, and everything to do with Frank the Tank. So
yeah, very proud of all my work with Frank. I'm starting some other stuff, and I get to contribute on a lot of different things behind the scenes of Barstool just by going to the office every day because there's incredible creative people everywhere. And I'm in the New York office, which jokingly gets a lot of shit, but there's a lot of awesome people there that create incredible content. And if you just show up, that's always my best advice to people with new jobs. Get there early, stay late. You're going to get all kinds of opportunities that you wouldn't have even thought of. For me, it was an interesting path. I moved to Italy after college, which a lot of people kind of snickered at. And then I joined a startup when I was 26. I needed to get healthcare, came back to New York. And where I really struck gold was I worked for a small startup called Vettery, and the founder, Brett Adcock, and co-founder Adam Goldstein both pushed me so hard. And I turned into the original salesman. I ended up running a 200-person sales team, and it was a wild run. And I got to really experience what it's like working for the founders, the bosses, the guys that don't have breaks or weekends or family time. And they were broke at the time building this thing. They're both incredibly successful now if you look them up. And when people are like, "Oh, it must be hard to work for Frank," it's like try working for Brett. That's a whole other level.
For sure.
So anyways, what happened was after that job didn't, it worked out really well, but they went on to their next thing. My favorite thing wasn't the actual sale of the product. It was really working for these legends and just growing under them. So I went on to do some other sales jobs and the pandemic hit. And frankly, being single during the pandemic, I just moved to LA and I didn't know anybody. And if you went up and introduced yourself to somebody, it was like,
Get away. Yeah.
attempted homicide.
Yeah.
So I was just sitting there by myself. It was very lonely. And Barstool was like the content I leaned on. It was like my comfort food. And then I just made a decision one day that I'm going to take a swing at this thing. And I actually was working at a law firm in New York City for a little bit, which was wild. Then I joined another startup, but I was basically working a full-time job. And I eventually, what happened, sorry, to back up a little bit, was while I was going through these job changes, Big Cat every Sunday does a thing called Fantasy Corner where he opens it up to questions. He opened it up. We had an interaction, which opened up DMs. I then went ahead and DM'd Big Cat just a gambling pick, nothing else, just a pick, every single day for over 400 days before 8 a.m., just to make the point that every day I woke up and I thought about working for Barstool without actually saying it.
Right.
I think the point landed. I eventually got Stephen Che on the Yak to come to a Knicks game with me, which led to me sending Big Cat a funny anecdote from the game. He let me call into the show. Everybody on the show came to a game with me. They all went to Super Bowl week. I was losing momentum. I'd sunk a lot of money in at this point. I was really trying to get my foot in the door. And I realized Frank the Tank had separately responded, but he wasn't on the Yak. So I reached back out to him. He came to a Knicks game with me. I thought we had good seats, but I had no idea we happened just serendipitously sat right behind Spike Lee. We were all over, everything. And then Frank, to his credit, was the one guy that immediately reciprocated and said, "Why don't you come to a Mets game? Why don't you come to a Devils game?"
Right.
And then I think, the two X factors were Mikey Betts, our producer in Chicago, who had known Frank for a long time. He could have like boxed me out kind of and been like, I'm Frank's guy. Instead, he brought me in and made me part of the family. And I'll always owe him for that. He also created Frank Walks. It was his idea. He took me aside and said, we need to take care of Frank. So he'll always deserve credit for that. And then Stu Feiner, who just took me in like family right away because he's always taking care of Frank. So when he saw that I was doing stuff with Frank, he invited me over and I spent like the whole summer there, which led to Rough and Rowdy. I knocked a guy out on 48 hours notice, which was crazy.
Yeah.
He wasn't exactly Evander Holyfield, but I'll still take it. It was an awesome moment.
Counts. Yeah, exactly.
And then, they hired me. So we started this Frank Walks thing. I think the really great thing about Barstool is Dave is incredibly pragmatic and exactly what you see from the outside is what it is on the inside. He's the realest CEO in the world. He just says stuff out loud that other CEOs don't say, and they like hide behind HR departments. I'm very proud to work for a guy like that. And then you see the other stuff he does, the charitable stuff. Like I don't need to blow smoke up his ass.
Well,
but
the
it's
pizza
cool
place
work.
the other day, right? With the 60,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He does it like that's just who he is.
Yeah.
That's not like for the camera. That's who he is. That's why it came so naturally. It was in the moment. So I'm loving it. And I think there's a lot of stuff we can do with Barstool. But the coolest thing with Frank has been watching him go from somebody that was really famous for losing his temper to when we walk every day, people say, keep up the walks. Great. I started exercising because of you. We get messages. We have Don, he has terminal 4 cancer, stage 4 cancer, and he's just battling, walking, doing everything possible to get himself healthy. And he's part of our like Frank Walks crew. And that's a really cool thing because Frank obviously makes people laugh, but it's a much more rewarding thing when you're actually inspiring people to do things that are good for themselves. Not to be too corny and wholesome because that's not,
it's great.
Traditional Barstool way, but it's been a special ride.
No, you should be proud of that. That's great. I mean, working for Frank sounds like a blast. You know what I mean? I mean, people always get on him, like you said. Some of his Mets takes, I'm a big Mets fan. Some of his Mets takes sometimes used to get under my skin, but until I started to really understand him, and I think the walking really helped because you really get to see him talking to people and that he really isn't just this babbling fool. And he seems like from the outside in the beginning. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, he's really just a good guy and like a real fan. And this is
Well,
really
it's
him, you
it's the
know?
Ted Lasso thing of be curious, not judgmental.
Right,
And
right.
and nobody, I think, obviously there's good and there's bad, but like people are complicated, right?
Mhm.
And when you see Franco on a rant, to think it's just about the Dolphins and the guy hasn't been through some shit in his life, you'd kind
Mhm.
of have to be an idiot if you
Right, of
really thought about
course.
it. So I think it's been really great both from a health perspective, physically and mentally, just really getting to know each other and talking stuff through and understanding his past. And I think he's happier than he's ever been in his life.
Mhm.
Not just because he's like gotten famous, but because he feels like he's putting good stuff out into the world. And it's not just like, you know, I always tell him you still got to bring the fire once in a while. Like you don't have to hide it, but you don't have to be motherfucking people every day either.
With that journey, and you're talking about all the different jobs you had and then landing at the spot you're on now, and it sounds like enthusiastic and really happy about the work that you're doing. What would you say now that you're here has been kind of uh what you've learned in this moment of working at Barstool that you would say surprises you from, oh, I have to put in all this hard work to get here, to get in. Now that you're in, what have you learned from being at Barstool Sports?
I mean, I've learned a ton, and I'm around incredibly talented people that have skill sets that are brand new to me because I was in very corporate startup world my whole professional career. And before that, I was working abroad. As the only American, I worked in Italian, and I went into Barstool as a fan. So it's a very kind of weird thing.
Yeah.
With that said, in terms of the work ethic, in terms of like the way Frank operates, again, when we talk, like look up Brett Adcock, he's the founder of Figure Robots, right? Like currently, right now, he's in Palo Alto right now. Like I guarantee it, in a warehouse, working physically on a
Yeah.
robot that's going to walk around and do stuff. That's how smart this dude is. That's who I directly reported to before he became, you know, the monster that he was destined to become. This was like in his late 20s. So he would call me late at night and motherfuck me, like even when sales were going well, just to challenge me. Like he was like a Michael Jordan type of guy. So when people think it's so difficult, because Frank's going on a rant about the Dolphins, it's like, guys, when Frank's yelling, if you actually listen, he's almost never yelling at me. You know what I mean? So yeah, like I appreciate you guys having a little more of the curiosity side. And I do think the world's going to see more and more of him going forward. And they're going to
Good.
like it.
That's good. As long as also if the Mets keep playing well, that's going to keep more of a spotlight on him as well.
That
That
helps a
definitely helps.
lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, spring is coming.
Spring is coming, and with Juan Soto, with that, it was that. What was his initial reaction? Was it the same way that we saw it publicly? I'm sure it was, but like you were saying, he seems very genuine.
He
The Juan Soto
publicly
stuff.
and privately said that if the Mets won one of their two games against the Braves and made the wild card, he would be positive about the Mets. And then they went on that run. And
Right.
he's been so positive. He at first in general, and then he toned it back a little bit closer to normal. But about the Mets, he is nothing but praise.
Mhm.
Not a negative thing.
The hate
And
rally was fun though. That was fun to see.
yeah, the hate rally since then. I even think if the Mets came out and got off to a slow start,
Yeah.
I'm optimistic that he'd stay optimistic. I
Mhm.
think they've bought that much good faith. They tortured him for a long time and they went
Yeah.
on a magical run. That's what he needed.
Yeah.
Sports does that. I mean, it is wild because I think that all of us in our sports fandom just, if your team's always good, I mean, my teams suck. Like the Nets suck. They've sucked most of my life, but then you have sprinkles of these magical moments. And I know as a Knicks fan with a lot of mediocrity over the last 20 years, with some good bright spots. Alex gets mad if you say in the last 20 years there hasn't been good years. There have been a
Like there's
couple of good
nothing.
years,
Yes.
but
I've lived
now
through the
it's
mellow
like,
years that happened. Yeah.
the Knicks are a legit
Uh,
title contender, and
More
it's
on Mike's side of that as a diehard Knicks fan.
Yeah,
We've
I
not
mean, they weren't great, but there was one year in there that was really great
Alex gets
too.
got
defensive.
to the conference semifinals. I
I
mean, my
know, but it was
last
fun.
great
It was fun. It wasn't like the Stephon Marbury years,
99,
Yeah.
99 was living.
Right.
99.
Is that
And last year when, that sequence against the Sixers, that was electric.
what's
Yeah.
your favorite Knicks season of your life?
1999.
How
Mhm.
old would you have been then?
I was 10 years old, but I know it sounds super
No,
young,
no,
but I was
I
literally
getcha.
like 4 years until I died. I didn't watch cartoons. I watched Michael Jordan videos. So like
Mhm.
I just studied. Jordan had just retired. It was a 50-game season because of the NBA lockout. For all you load management defending, can I curse? Well, whatever, I won't.
No, you can't. No, you can
Um,
curse. Say
You can
whatever you want.
curse. Yeah, it's
they
okay.
they played
Pick your
triple headers.
curse.
You look this up,
I remember
kids.
that. Yep.
They played triple headers that season, and guys like Ewing would play back to back to back, and his whole body was broken. They
Triple
literally
headers.
put ice on everything. The Knicks got in as the 8 seed at that time in NBA history, the only 8 seed to ever win in the first round were the Denver Nuggets in 1994 against the Seattle SuperSonics in 5 games, overtime, electric game.
Yeah.
Mutombo led the Nuggets. Robert Pack was
Famous picture of him holding the ball at
We
the end. And yeah.
we have a
Yeah.
lot
so
of
the
Robert
Knicks.
Pack talk on this podcast, by the way. He
Former
I love
net.
comes up.
Robert Pack.
Alex is obsessed with him, and he comes up a lot.
I
But
love Robert Pack.
he
Yeah,
was a
he's
So
net
awesome.
then the
too. But
Knicks
yeah,
went on. They faced the Hawks. They swept them. They whooped their ass. And then when they were playing the Pacers, they really weren't supposed to win. And Ewing got hurt. And then Camby stepped up. And Sprewell was brand new to the team. He got into the starting lineup in the playoffs. And all of a sudden the Knicks were in the finals.
The
And
4 point play. Yeah, and the whole thing.
it
Yeah.
was it was it
Yeah.
was a that was a magical year. Nothing's come close to that for I don't think anybody my age or older, I would guess.
No, yeah,
99
for
Knicks are
sure.
the only Knicks
Sorry,
team.
younger.
The 99 Knicks, I would say, are the only Knicks team that I like in my life where I probably was rooting for them at that stage of my life too. Like that team doesn't annoy me. I will
And I
say
got
that.
lucky enough, I became friends with Alan Houston later in life. I'm still friends with him from his charity, Fizzle, Fizzll, if you ever check it out. He's just a great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy.
I saw he was on Frank Walks
Yeah, he
also.
came and did a prank walks, and
That
he's
was a
just
good one.
a great
Yeah.
human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what do you think about the Knicks this year? You think that that the Towns trade kind of rocked a lot of people? I mean, I think more people were upset that we lost, I'll say we, as Knicks fans, lost Dante DiVincenzo, who was a huge fan favorite. And, it was really hard to see him go. People were ready to get rid of Julius Randle, and Towns had this narrative of being soft. It shows that, it shows how public narratives can be false because he is the farthest thing from soft. Like he grew up out of the stuff from when he was really young in Minnesota, getting bullied by Jimmy Butler, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you see this team going? And now they're starting to click and they're really rolling ever since the slow start. How far do you see this team going?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is something that nobody seems to be saying, which is that Jim Dolan deserves some credit.
Oh, absolutely.
For
Absolutely
all of
agreed.
the owners, like the Dolphins owner, who's kept Chris Greer in power for like 25 years and they've won one playoff game and he's just kept them. If you actually look, Dolan has hired really high profile people that on paper at the time, it's like Phil Jackson. At the time, he's the
Right.
most winningest coach of all
He
time.
got a standing
But
ovation from the fans when he was
at the
introduced. Yeah.
time, yeah, and then
Yeah.
he stays loyal. He gives them a few years, and then he moves on to the next guy.
Mm.
So what Dolan did this time was he thought outside the box just to zoom out, and he brought in an agent and the head of an agency, sorry, a guy that was the top agent and then runs the most powerful agency. So what that means is he has all the relationships. He
Right.
knows how the contracts works. He knows how to get the right players together. He knows which players like each other and don't like each other. And most importantly, he has the network of people that actually know those things, right? Like, and at Worldwide West Worldwide, I always forget how you say his name.
Yeah.
So credit to him because all the way back to the Anunoby trade, the trade this summer, each time I've reacted emotionally and thought that it probably wasn't the right move. This summer, though, I've had, smarter people inform me that with the cap situation, which I don't understand the math of,
Nobody
keeping
does.
Hartenstein, keeping DiVincenzo, keeping that entire core together was essentially impossible. And even if you did it, you would have no idea if Randall was going to stay. So like the team had to flip over in a way. And now looking back and seeing the way Cat's playing, I think it's been great. I think the Knicks are playing really well. However, Alex, I will say this. The one big red flag for me in the games I've watched is their interior defense, particularly help at the rim. And in the playoffs, I think that's one of the absolute pillars to actually winning a championship, which is funny to even think the Knicks are in that realm. But when we're talking about playing the Celtics and Tatum and Brown and these guys attacking the rim, if we're banking on Mitchell Robinson getting healthy and playing 35 minutes a game, you're tripping. And
Right.
Cat is not, forget about the soft or not soft narrative shit. He's not a good help defender. He will get blocks because he's tall, as any 7-foot person should, but he is not a great instinctive defender, either one-on-one, but more importantly in the help. I do think that is going to be a major problem for the Knicks, and they need to make a move for it. And I'm sure Leon's aware of it, so I have faith in Leon. That to me right now is the biggest red flag, along with the depth, just not having a ton of firepower off the bench.
But at least you're having these conversations where you can get that deep into it, where you're like, this is the issue. So I am jealous of that, because you've gotten to the point where,
no, it's
it's
a good problem.
To get to that problem. And we were talking about this before as well. And I was actually telling this to Alex, because I am the biggest NBA defender. If I get, I'm in Pittsburgh right now. There's not a lot of NBA people here. People are like, I don't really watch the NBA here. I defended it my whole life, right? Like, I grew up and I became a Net fan in '94. Drazen Petrovic got me hooked to the Nets. Ever since then, Nets, NBA, I've been into it. And when everybody was like, oh, there's too many threes, defended it. Maybe because the Nets are just so bad, and I know they want to be bad. But about 2 weeks ago, I go to Alex, like, I can't watch this shit. It is awful. I'm watching like Keon Johnson put up 10 threes a game, and I'm like, this is hard to watch.
Feel a lot better. The Knicks are as good as they've been in forever. And hopefully you can tell I'm a real fan. Like I watched them through all these years.
For sure.
And I told you before we started recording, I've been having a hard time watching even Knicks game. Like I watched on Christmas, but even Knicks games lately, because of this. I sent to Alex before the pod a little thing I wrote that's on Twitter that's titled "What Happened to the NBA." So, Mike, I want you to first feel validated in your feelings. It's not that the Nets are bad. There is something wrong. And I'll put some hard numbers behind it, because people just throw hyperbole around. In 2004, the average NBA team took 15 three-pointers per game per team. This year, it's 35 per game per team. Everyone always loves to say that there's so much better shooters, they're so much more talented. They shot 36% in 2004. They shoot 36% this year. I would argue that because of in 2004, I'll do a little history here. A few things happened all at once. Michael Jordan had just retired for the second time. Kobe Bryant was under the rape allegations, and LeBron James was still a teenager. The NBA didn't know who the face was going to be going forward. The Pistons just upsetted the Lakers with the best defense in NBA history. 4-1. They beat Shaq, Kobe, Karl Malone, Gary Payton. Malone was hurt in that series, but it was still shocking. And the Pistons went on to, I think, 6 straight conference finals. The NBA changed the rules as LeBron came in, not, connect the dots as you want, so that there was basically no, physical contact. If you actually look up the language of the rules, so again, we're not using hyperbole, if you impede the movement or at all the progress of an offensive player, it's a foul. So the way I like to say to people is, if you were playing pickup basketball with your friends and you called the game the way the NBA calls it, your friends would tell you to leave the court, because you'd be ruining the whole fucking game. Like, that's not how basketball works.
Right.
That's why it's insulting to fans, because you're like, if I was playing, I wouldn't call that a foul if I had the ball. Even if it's a close game, and at the end of the, that's a clean, good defensive play, put chest to chest. They've gotten rid of all of that, and they think that fans like all of the high scoring up and down. So how do you fix it? I think there's a couple of ways to fix it rather than just bitch about it, right? Well, the most simple thing is switch the rule back. Let these guys on the perimeter get up in your body, get up in your face, loosen it up. Less fouls. I think they do it less later in the season in the playoffs. Do it all year. Let it be aggressive all year. If the three-point shooting in the analytics continue to the point where you look at these shooting graphs from 20 years ago and you can see all the beautiful mid-range from T-Mac to, it's not just Kobe. It's like there were so many great scorers, Glenn Robinson, like guys that could just, Jamal Mashburn, they just eat in the mid-range, Allen Houston. And there's a real art to the game, opposed to there's no way to stop the guy with the ball. The defense collapses, you kick it out, you swing it that's what happens every play. That's why it's boring, because it's the same thing every time. Even if they're making the shots, it's still fucking boring. So this is a radical one. I'd love to hear from, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling on, but
Go
from
for it.
two NBA guys, imagine if after X amount, it could be 25, 30, 35, 40, you tell me the number, but after X amount of 3-point attempts, from then on, every 3-point attempt is only worth 2. So you can still take them, but they're no longer worth 3. So when a team takes a 3-pointer now, if you're a point guard, if you're Cat, when you're 35 feet away from the rim, if you get 33-point attempts, you want to take good ones.
Right.
And then it might you see actual offense engaging. You don't take the first shot or the second shot.
Yeah.
And it's not just a mathematical equation of if I take more threes, I have a higher percentage chance of getting more points, which is quite literally what's happening.
I don't think it's that bad. I mean, I think something along the lines of hold that until the last 2 minutes, maybe, and let the threes count. Then I think would be cool. But I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I think that would be cool. I think it's kind of cool because it's one of those baseball rules that I actually liked when it changed. Not like the runner on second and extra innings and all that nonsense, but the making a relief pitcher, face 3 batters unless it's the end of an inning. Because it was getting ridiculous. Righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty. Like, come
It's
on.
almost the opposite of the pitch clock, where it's
Right.
like we need to get back, we need to slow it down and get back to the essence of it. And
Right.
I actually had that thought too. Mine was the last minute, but I think you're right. The last 2 minutes,
Right.
all threes count again.
Yeah.
100%. I think that's perfect.
Well,
But then during the game, they're much more selective.
Right. You'll save them. Yeah.
To your point about the 2004 thing, and by the way, the Nets played the Pistons in the second round that year, had a 3-2 lead on Detroit. Jason Kidd was hurt, couldn't hold it off. Nets win that series, go to the championship. The NBA is fine. We have a better, when the 2004 title, that logic doesn't happen. I'd love it.
I mean, it's 2005. They were. Whew.
But
that was Pistons. Sorry, that was Pistons Spurs. Nets were back to back against the Lakers.
But I think it's
no, they were Lakers.
It was Spurs, Lakers. Yeah, Lakers. Spurs.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like little bit each time. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And I do think it's gotten out of control where it's now at the point where, I got Day'Ron Sharp taking threes, and I'm like, that can't be a higher percentage shot.
Achua shooting threes. Yeah.
It's too much. It's hard to watch. And I know the ratings were up during Christmas. They were up the best they've been in 5 years. I think it's just the eye test, right? Like I would say to anybody listening to this podcast, go back on YouTube and watch a game from 1996 to 2000, 2001, and just watch it, because I'm going to challenge myself to do this. I'm kind of curious, like, what the hell did it look like? I forget.
I do it all the time
because I've seen so much of this. I'm like,
that was basketball.
I went to a Nets-Knicks game at the Garden in 2002, and the Nets made 14 threes on like 22 attempts, and it was insanity.
Yes.
Now you take 22 threes, the coaches be mad at you. I'd like to be curious, like, go watch an old game, be interesting.
So I think if you watch an old game, you'll see so many different things. One of them is that there's positions. Like there's a power forward, there's a small forward, there's a shooting guard. And the power forward is not really supposed to have a ton of ball skills. His job is to protect the paint. You also have to remember back then you had to play one-on-one. You couldn't, man-to-man. You couldn't play zone defense. So another reason there were positions, you couldn't just have a bunch of wing guys, because if you had a wing guy on Charles Oakley, he'd get 35 rebounds, playing next to you.
Sure.
And so it's a very different game, but I think when people watch it, you will see moments where players look a little less coordinated, a little less skilled. But you're right, the essence of the game, the picks, the coming off of screens, the actual working off of
running a play.
Contact, it feels more like how basketball is supposed to be played. And then the competitiveness. And I think that's the other part of it. It's another one I like to equate to pickup games. When everybody's totally winded and nobody gives a fuck anymore, that's in a pickup basketball game when you start going down and just taking the first 3-pointer, because everyone's fucking shot. People aren't even getting
Let's
back.
end this game. Yeah.
That's what the NBA feels like, opposed to when you're playing a pickup game. And I'm in New York City. Frank and I think we're going to Harlem next week. I told him I'll bring my sneakers. He loves watching me play. I'll go out because I'm scrappy. I'll go out and like, you get bodied the fuck up the whole time, but it's clean and you don't call fouls and you don't act like a little wimp and you try to get to the hoop. And it's such a more fun, pure way to play basketball and to watch basketball.
For sure, for sure. Fouls are only when you're shooting and they really smack your arm that really affects the shot. And you're like, I can't. We gotta,
And not, and I
check
don't
out.
want to be extreme, not even that, but it's like if
Yeah,
you really impede, if you forcefully move somebody, it's so different than like if a guy dribbles into you, that's not a foul on you. It's
yeah.
just not.
And
Even
I
for
was texting you
contact, it's
before
not.
as it's true. And I was texting you before, and another thing that think killed the NBA was the malice at the Palace. Coincidentally, also the Pistons, where the fight just went. It was too far. You're in the stands, and I know the fan threw it on our test, et cetera, et cetera. And we had him on the pod also, and he told us how embarrassed he was in that moment and everything like that. And it was for the whole NBA, but because of that, they went to such an extreme, the NBA, that fighting is like the cardinal sin. So fighting in the NBA is a big part of the history. Like there's big, famous punches, the Rudy Tomjanovich thing, and just the Knicks and the Heat, the Knicks and the
On a hot
Pacers, the
take
Knicks and the
though,
Bulls.
you
I
want
miss that.
I'll give you a hot take.
All right, let's hear
They don't know how to fight no more. They don't want to fight.
it.
They used to fucking know how to fight. These
Because it
guys,
had to come up in
they're at
different circumstances.
AAU,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
probably top recruits. Everybody in the gym knows who they are. No one's swinging at these guys. Like,
yeah,
maybe I'm wrong, and I'm sure it's not true for all of them, and I'm sure some of them come from really tough backgrounds.
yeah, yeah.
But on the court,
Mhm.
when's the last time you saw a guy just properly square up and throw a punch? These guys don't know how to fight.
Right, they roll around on the ground if they actually get into
Embiid
it.
was
Yeah.
just bodying a 5'4" woman referee. Like
Yeah.
these guys, these are the most telephone tough guys. And that's another
Yeah.
thing for guys that grew up playing ball where like part of basketball used to be like other sports where you take pride in not being a little bitch
Right. You get
and
checked
not
if
being
you
too
are. Yeah,
aggressive.
somebody will check you and be like, "What's going on with you?"
But
Yeah.
even like you get knocked down, you get right up. You're not, this isn't soccer. Like, we used
Right.
to
Don't
make fun of
cry. Yeah.
soccer.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
don't flop around.
yeah. Mhm.
Reggie Miller used to do that. That's why we hated Reggie Miller. Now
He
everybody.
invented the flop. Yeah, exactly.
If you could you're sitting at a bar with Tom Thibodeau and you could ask him one question. You're talking about the NBA and the game and how he's playing it. What would you ask Tom if you could ask him one question?
I would ask him, why don't you get Cat to play more back to the basket on the post? Because he's a perfect example of a modern big man that plays outside in instead of inside out. Team's doing great. I think we would be even greater because I see when Cat gets the ball with his back to the basket, he has a fantastic baby hook. He has great hands. He's got great power. Why are
Amazing
we not
post
dumping
moves.
the ball inside to this guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
With all of our shooters? Why is
No,
he
it's true.
setting up outside the 3-point line? And then I'd also say thank you. I love you. My last 25 years have been miserable. You brought heart back to the franchise. We should have hired you a long time ago. You were on the team in the late 90s when we used to have heart. I'd probably open with that, Mike, and then I'd get into the Cat stuff.
glad that's the opener. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, the Knicks had a lot of great assistant coaches back then, man. It was crazy with Van Gundy and under Van Gundy, they had like Steve Clifford and a couple other guys. Kenny Atkinson, Mike's boy. They had a lot of guys who's crushing it with the Cavs now, which is crazy. In the Eastern Conference, who do you see? That's a good segue. Who do you see
No,
coming
that's
out?
another one too,
Yeah,
Alex, that's worth mentioning. And Mike, maybe it sounds like a snooty Knicks fan, so tell me as a Nets fan if you feel the same way.
Can I'm gonna before you say it, we'll do this.
he's gonna get
0 being not snooty, 10 being you hit
so
the
snooty.
You hit the
Yeah,
James
snooty.
Snood on the
yeah.
computer.
So I'll,
Yeah,
I'll say 0 to 10. I'll
So
let you
growing
know what I
up
think.
on the late 90s, early 2000 Knicks, very early 2000s, but really late 90s Knicks. I got so used to every night we would try to not let the other team score 100 points.
Mhm.
I think I actually enjoy like hard, scrappy defense. And when I play basketball, I'm one of those weird guys, like the guy in pickup, you're like, oh, why is this fucking idiot guarding me that's taking it too seriously?
Right,
But
right.
that's
Yeah.
how I get my workout. It's like what I
Sure.
enjoy in the game.
right. Get the garbage points also.
You
Right.
missed
Yeah.
that too as a Nets fan because like you guys weren't necessarily notoriously great. I mean, you made 2 finals, so you obviously were
So
good at
I will say that is not snooty at all. I mean that. I'm not just saying it because we kind of did the little preamble to that. I don't think it's snooty. Those net teams that made the NBA finals, they were
Yeah.
great on defense.
Tumbo,
They
Kenyon.
they played hard D. Like Kenyon, there's a game where
I love how
Ken-
Kenyon played.
Kenyon, there was the first, it was, I don't remember what exact year, but they were playing the Jazz, and Kenyon just punched Karl Malone and knocked him out.
Right.
There was no history.
That drive in the lane.
There's
yeah,
no
he just
history.
nailed him.
And he was, I don't know, he's like, I just didn't fucking like that guy. I wanted him down. He just hit him. I mean, like that just was the Nets mentality of like, I don't think as many Knicks fans noticed it because it was in New Jersey, and it probably wasn't as top of mind because not as popular of a team. But that team played hard, and it all started with Jason Kidd. I mean,
You
he
guys
played
knocked us out one
incredible
year.
defense.
We were the 8th seed, I think, in 2004, and you were the 1 seed.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
We had
Fugazi
Stephon
series.
Marbury. It's the one year we
Yes.
made it with Marbury. See, I know ball.
yeah.
Tim Thomas and
Tim
So yeah,
Tom.
they played.
Tim.
What
he's he's at the games now, man. He's a Knick alumni. He's like
Nothing
coming
but
over.
love for Tim Thomas. It's not about you, Tim. You're a very talented player. It's just those
It's a
years.
waste of talent. Yeah, a big
Those
waste of
years
talent.
got tough. Well, no,
Yeah.
I mean millions of dollars. I wouldn't say waste.
I know, but like he could have been an all-star. Like he really could have been. He was that good. You know, he was like one of those guys, like Al Harrington, that like one of those guys that came.
He
through the
had a
Garden.
lot. Al Harrington's a great one to. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
he hit the bench once and dropped 40. It was just like
Yeah, on LeBron. Yeah, I was at that game. He went toe to toe with LeBron. People forget
one
that
of
game.
those
It
guys
was
that
crazy.
just certain nights they
Do-
turn it on.
Do you think, as you mentioned about like the NBA and what you've noticed with it, and you've done a really good job laying out the
Mhm.
problems with it, how you might want to fix it? Would a Nick title this year still feel as exciting, or because of how you're?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm not that bitter, and I think I need to get my shit together. I've also just been super busy, but I need to start watching some more ball. I still stand firmly on the fact that there needs to be changes. And let's just be clear, the first change, and I don't know if this gets me in trouble, but whatever, it needs to be Adam Silver. I was blessed enough and if you Google it, you can probably find, I wrote out a whole thing on it, but I harassed David Stern for years with emails until he eventually agreed to take a meeting with me.
Really?
And yeah, it was wild. I finally got an email back. It just said in all caps the time, address, and stop emailing me. And then I showed up, and he basically cursed me out for like an hour. And then we set up another meeting, and then he dropped me back off at work on his way to the hospital. And I'd meet with him like every 6 months. And I was trying to get my way into the NBA, but he wasn't just going to hand anything to me, even though he probably could. Instead,
Yeah.
he was really just kind of mentoring me.
That's great.
And he used to tell me all these great stories. So, anyways, Adam Silver needs to go. I miss David Stern, and I'll wrap that story. When he passed away, it was a weird. It was very sad for me.
Yeah.
But his last email to me was quite nice. It was 3 words, but it was very nice. He was like, "Good," or 4 words. "Good job, keep pushing," or something like that.
Wow.
But when he passed away,
That's
his
cool.
secretary emailed me, and she said, you're on David Stern's list of mentees. So you're invited to Radio Music City Hall for his funeral."
Wow.
And he showed up there, and Jordan and Kareem, and it was just like, and I didn't know he'd put me in his list of mentees, and he thought of me as a mentee the whole time. So anyways, Silver has no clue what he's doing. I don't even want to like use mean language or call him names or whatever. Clearly a smart guy that's done great with his life. But the gimmicks between naming an award for every round of the playoffs to turning the All-Star game into tournaments versus, players, drafts, the different jerseys, all that stuff, to the in-season tournament, all of it, they're all gimmicks. And what you're not looking at is the product. And just
Right.
like any other business, you have to look at the product and listen to the customers and not tell the customers what they should care about. Like, give me a break with some of this.
I agree.
I just-
man.
I was so happy the Knicks didn't win the cup. I don't ever want the Knicks.
I
to
don't
win.
want that either. I told Mike that too. I'm like, let Trae Young shoot the fake dice. I'm like, get that loss. I don't need that banner or that fake game championship where it doesn't count. Some Nick is gonna get hurt in that game.
Burn that banner. I don't
Yeah.
want no banner.
No, and no, with Adam Silver, I agree. I think he just does whatever the players want. They
Yeah.
ask him this, and he just bends to whatever the players want. And
And that's
I'm
how
not all for player
he-
empowerment, but like, so there's got to be a line somewhere, you know?
It used to be the inverse. I mean,
Right.
Melo talks about when he took that cheap shot in the Garden when he was on the Nuggets,
Marty Collins, yeah.
just fucking jacked him and then ran away like a little girl. Somehow he never gets
He
shipped.
ran off the TV screen, yeah. No,
Yeah, he didn't get shipped for that. Jared Jeffries, what a dog trying to get him. They had to like rip his jersey off. But did you ever hear Melo talk about when Stern called
Yeah.
him into office?
on 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, like he was like, whenever he calls, everybody was like, "Oh shit!" Like
But
it was
Melo,
like a whole
Melo
thing.
was
Yeah.
like Stern very, very clearly said, "Oh shit, my thing might die." He said to me, "I know who you hang out with. I know the circles you're in, and this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You're completely replaceable. So, just, make your decision." Like it was like a really quick meeting, but he basically said like, I know more than you could ever imagine. So you're either get your whole fucking life together or you're done. And then
Wow.
Mello was like, it was the scariest thing I've ever dealt with. I straightened my whole life out.
I
Yeah.
you know I will admit I was wrong here. I was into all the tournament stuff. I was into the gimmicky things, and I typically like that stuff.
I
And
like the
I was
play-in.
into
The
it at
play-in
first,
Doesn't
grew
mean
on
you're
me. Yeah.
wrong.
but
Yeah.
I this past season I said, yeah, it's not it
It's
felt
not working. Yeah.
if now I know all this stuff's for kids, and I think there's a lot of it that's for kids and it's for younger kids to get into, get excited
I
about.
don't
Like,
think the
hey,
season tournament is.
but I don't think like was it a little exciting the first time? The court's different, but this past year I saw it. I said I was a little like I went to a net game and net fans were waving their towels at this thing, and I'm just like, this is so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like, to
It
have
seems fake. It's
it
like,
is.
yeah.
I mean, you know, it was probably more energy than a net playoff game, right? But it was like just bizarre to have a net fans waving towels versus the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And I actually it was awkward. I thought it was awkward, and I
There-
admit I was wrong with all of it.
I think sometimes one of the biggest problems with business is people try to bring in new demographics by accidentally antagonizing or in some way pushing away their core.
Right.
And the NBA is kind of forgetting who their core fans are. And it's total losers like us that just want to watch
Yeah,
normal ball and not have fucking sparkles and glitter in our face all the time. Like, let the guys ball. And if they get in each other's face a little bit, it doesn't offend us. It's testosterone on the court. Like, this is what we do instead of going to war. We get into a fight on a basketball court. That's okay. It's not
right,
like it's not life and death. Like they're all going to be okay. You know what happens after you get into a fight and pickup? You become best friends with the guy you fought. Like
right.
you respect each other. Like people need to grow up. Everyone's so soft. And you
Yeah.
see it across every industry, but now it's in the NBA and it starts with a really soft commissioner who's controlled by a really soft, you know, head of the NBA in LeBron. And, you know, the guy's done a lot and he's put up with a lot, but he doesn't push competitive spirit. And that's
No,
what every
he
league needs
yeah.
to be based on is competitive spirit.
Yeah, he jumps from team to team, and it's just that whole era. I think a lot of fans like myself, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but maybe you agree that you're just tired of the LeBron, Steph, Durant, Kyrie, that era. Just it's just enough. Like we grew up with guys they'd play 12, maybe 15 years, and they were done. Like they're playing 20 something years. It's like I don't need to be, I just turned 40. I don't need to be 40 and still seeing LeBron. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was enough with Tom Brady torturing me as a Jets fan. I don't need to
Well,
see
the
these guys
problem
anymore. Like, it's
people
enough.
need to take him out. And not
Yeah.
I'm not saying injury wise. I'm saying get up in his face, guard him like a fucking man. Don't let and if the refs didn't baby everybody. But I don't have a problem with these with I think it's if they can hang around forever, good for them if they're good enough to keep playing. What bothers me is that they're in the NBA, there's a lot, and this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. There's a lot less senior leadership on the bench. So the bench is filled up with guys that are 20 years old that might or might not play, and they're probably not going to play. And then the starters are normally under 30 years old. So you don't have guys between 30 and 40 to coach up the young pups, both on and off the court. And I think that's been a huge issue across the league. But not, and that's an outlier to what you're talking about, which are the super duper stars that are staying
Right.
there forever.
Like the Taj
Outside of
Gibsons
them,
and stuff like that. You want
yeah,
the,
you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
have a lot of those guys hanging
yeah.
around anymore. And I think part of that problem now is everyone looks up to that generation, which is not what we want as old school fans. We want players to want to kill each other.
Yeah.
Like we
Or at
want to
least
not
on the
like.
court, try to kill each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
It
no, all
doesn't
in
have to be get
basketball.
real and like Melo meeting Garnett in the parking lot. It doesn't have to be like
It's
that,
also like when people call Embiid soft, let's just be clear. Nobody knows a thing about that man's personal life. Nobody knows
Right.
what like all we're ever talking about is what on the court. And if you're 7'1" and you're not gonna, really step in with your chest for help defense and try to block the opponent in New York City, someone's gonna call you soft. Fucking deal with it. You know what I mean? That's why
Right.
you get paid millions of dollars. And that's where just everybody needs to toughen up.
I hear you. I hear you. And it's like a guy who's like half of Embiid's size shouldn't be able to knock him to the ground by like bumping him a little bit.
He's
And he goes flying like all over the place. That's
Indeed,
just ridiculous.
I've had to calm it down because ever since he hurt Mitch, I've been on him on Twitter, and people think I'm
like
like
Alex.
to
Oh
calm
my
it.
God, I couldn't stand that. Mitchell Robinson is one of my
Yeah.
favorite players, and I really think he cost us a
I
shot at
got
a
Mitch to
championship
come
last
in and
year.
visit my sales team because
Oh, really?
one of my salespeople when I was running that team told me they couldn't get an in-person meeting, and I had such rage. I got real when I get really angry, I get calm,
Because
and
you like him as a you know him as a person also off the floor. Like yeah, that's cool.
I said to him,
He
I'm gonna
seems like
get.
such a great
I
guy.
said, you can't get an in-person meeting with X company. All right, I'm gonna get three in-person meetings with three different Knicks. And then I remember I walked away from him and I just thought, what the fuck did I just say? And I did it. I got
How'd you do
Allen,
it?
Lance Thomas, and Mitchell Robinson all separately.
How'd you do it?
A lot of Twitter DMs, just
I was
like
gonna say,
I'm,
spam him
I'm
like
gonna,
David
I'm gonna
Stern
have
and Big Cat, right?
like with Frank Walks, I've booked the majority of our stuff, Mikey Betts and myself, um, just via scrappiness, and then obviously
Yeah.
Frank being a superstar.
Well, I love that. I worked at CBS Sports Radio for 9 years. I had to book for 5, and I am very interested in hearing people's stories on how they book guests, how they get different people, and in this circumstance, with your sales team, I always love hearing those stories on how it's pulled off. I think it's
Yeah,
interesting.
so honestly, this is gonna sound maybe bad, but back in those days when I didn't have anything to offer, the most simple thing I would advise people to do is think about what you can offer them.
Mm,
So, with a lot of famous people, what they do have are charitable organizations. So, if you try to reach out to them through their charitable organizations with an actual plan and way to help, so it's
right.
not just lip service, you're actually going to tangibly help a good cause. That's a great way to get your foot in the door. That's just one example, but I'm not going to give away the whole bag.
Yeah, well,
And
we did that with
You don't
helps a
have
Chris
lot
to.
with those
Childs.
guys. And then what happens when
Yeah,
you go that route too, which obviously makes sense, is you end up with really good people
Hmm.
because you don't like want to work with assholes, and some people are assholes, but normally the guys with like good charitable organizations are pretty good people.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we did that with Chris Childs. He's a great guy. We had him on. We worked with his
God,
charity
he
for a
was
little bit.
clutch.
Yeah.
Ward used to play the first and third. He'd play the second and fourth.
Ha- and
Love Chris.
oh, go for it, Alex.
I was gonna say, if you want to close, I got one more, but you go ahead,
No,
and then
go for
we'll.
it, Alex.
I was gonna say, how is it sitting in that bar stool? Like, what do you call it? The fan cave where you're watching the games and the cameras on you, and like that's always the best content to me. I think, especially
Yeah, the
during like a
cave.
Mets playoff game or something like that. I think that's incredible, and I saw you were there for that, and I was just curious how that is.
Well, forget about there for that. I probably spend more of my conscious hours there than anywhere else because when I first started working at Barstool, Frank Earl Fleming, I don't know if you've heard of him, was my orientation leader,
Hmm.
which meant absolutely nothing was explained to me. No one was introduced to me, and I didn't even know where to sit. So I pulled up a chair adjacent to him at his desk, and then I proceeded to I was hammering business calls coming from a sales background, trying to get stuff going. I didn't even know what my job, I was just making it up as I went. And Clemmer, God bless him, really nice guy, took me aside and he was like, Jenks, I think you're probably annoying people. Obviously, I was just yelling on the phone when everyone else is like sitting quietly trying to do their work. So I migrated back to the cave, and now I
Hmm.
sit there every day. And how does it feel? It's the most surreal thing in the world, man. I mean, I used to watch these guys when I was really stressed out or feeling down. And I always try to remind them because one thing people don't understand about Barstool people is they do work really hard and they put a lot of pressure on themselves.
I bet.
And as mean and as tough as everybody is online, these people are much harder on themselves. And I always try to hype everybody up because they're all so talented. Even if some of them don't like me or love me or work with me, I'm always in admiration of all of them because they're fucking incredible and they've built something incredible. And a lot of the New York people have been there for 10 years, you know what I mean?
Mm.
So it makes sense they haven't like gotten to know me that well, but I'm still a fan. So it's funny, I sit in the back in the cave and a lot of times I'm kind of just watching how everybody operates and I just think, fuck, how lucky am I that I actually get to do something I want. And I think it's a good thing to close with too, just to remind people I'm 35, like I made this big decision when I was like 34. So don't ever listen to other people. You know what I mean? Like also don't throw your life away and take crazy risks.
Right.
But go for shit and don't wait. Don't overthink. Analysis by paralysis is like the number one reason people aren't happy. Just fucking do shit. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you're not going to regret it. But what you will regret is not trying.
No, you're totally right about that. I mean, for me personally, like that is a problem for me sometimes where I'll overthink things, and sometimes like just go for it. Don't do that. And if you can push past all that and just you gotta be okay with failing, you gotta be okay with making mistakes, and just know that everybody's gonna do the same problem. But if you just keep going, it doesn't matter. So I think that's beautiful words. And I do appreciate that. I think that's good stuff.
And I think another thing that you can always have faith in is when you're putting stuff out there, unless it's like really weird or offensive or whatever, if you're putting an effort in, people notice. And it's not that they're going to notice after 1 week or 1 month or maybe even 6 months. But like with me and Frank, there was a long time where I was like the weird dude who was like a leech who came from a rich family, all of which is not fucking true. I worked my ass off and earned all my savings and all that kind of stuff. But they saw that I was with him working hard every day. And then eventually people realized like, oh no, he's real. So not about me, but about everyone out there. If you put the effort in, the people will see. So like just bet on don't listen to everyone else. People project all their fears on you.
Last question. Where do the Knicks go this season? Where do you have them finishing? And do the Nets win the lottery?
Do the Nets win the lottery? No, just mathematically, I would never say that one team is going to win the lottery.
Way to use logic. Appreciate that.
Kill your dream.
I have a feeling in my gut that I've never had before that if Leon Rose makes one move before the trade deadline to help shore up our interior defense, the Knicks will win the championship this year.
Okay. Yeah, that's tough, because it would have to be at the expense of Mitchell Robinson, and that'll hurt my feelings, and I'm sure yours too, because
Wouldn't have to be.
But
Not have to be. We have other assets, and Leon's a fucking wizard.
He has been.
And I'm not talking about getting Rudy Gobert or some big names guy in the middle. I'm just talking about like a good, solid, reliable big in the middle.
That's fair. I mean, Jericho Sims is not that guy. We've seen that. He's okay, but I definitely can see that. I'm with you, and it might come in the buyout market. It might come in anyway, but it's hard to doubt Leon Rose really right now.
The reason I think the Knicks can actually win a championship is we have really solid perimeter defenders. We have a guy that can score on the interior if we can get him to play a little more back to the basket. But most importantly, in close playoff games, which I think the Knicks will be in, we have the guy to give the ball to at the end of the game, which most teams don't have. That's one of the most, valuable. It's very simple, but it's a little bit underrated in a lot of ways. It's one of the knocks on LeBron, to be honest. When you talk about like his championship runs, he would always kind of have a guy next to him that could handle the ball, like in the big moments, like Wade or Kyrie. But anyways, I digress.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to doubt Leon Rose. Ever since 2022, that was a rough year with like the Fournier and Kemba and all that, Noel extension. He kind of fixed all that by trading everybody. And then ever since then, he's hit a home run after home run and grand slam after grand slam.
Where is Evan Fournier? Is he back
in France? I think he's back in France.
Yeah,
I think he's back playing overseas. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, Jenks, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. We learned a lot about you and about Barstool and some.
Yeah, you guys ever want to talk hoops? Have me back on. I love basketball.
For sure.
Cool. This has been Bad Weather Fans, episode 247. Jenks, we appreciate the time. Good stuff, man. I hope your prediction is wrong. I mean that with all love, but thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.